Romantic obsession with someone is more so an addiction than actual feelings for that someone. And if you give me some time through this video, I'm going to explain this to you and we will break down what it is, why it happens, and obviously how to move through it. The way that we've been talking about love in the past few years has shifted. And I feel like we finally began to identify the codependent ways in which we fall in love and how enmeshed we get and how it can overtake our lives. But also, what has happened in the past few years is that a few terms surfaced and we were able to finally explain different experiences that we had normalized as something that actually is not so normal, although it is very common. And one of these words is the word limerence, which technically is a word to describe the intense infatuation that we will have with someone, obsessive, and we're thinking about them all the time. We're making scenarios in our mind. But the other element that limerence holds is most of the time this person that we're in limerence with is someone that we're not really in a relationship to them. And I know some people will say, that limerence is also something that can happen when you have an affair with someone because you're thinking about them too much. But in what I have learned about limerence and how I define it and how I will be talking about it throughout everything you see me do, has always the element that we don't really know the person, even if we are in some type of relationship with him. It is very monodimensional, right? Because, and I say this because it's an important distinction to make, the reason why limerence manifests and is able to manifest is because we don't have the full picture of who someone is, but we have enough clues to create projections for that person and like decide who they are, and then we fall in love with those projections. And what projections are really the way we see someone is basically coming from us. So we project onto them the things that we need to see so that we can make our story click. Now, it's important that we have terms to explain our experiences, but we don't have to use these terms as a diagnosis, and limerence actually is not a diagnosis, but it's a word that the researcher, the person who came up with it, Dorothy Tenev, I think it was about in the 80s, really gave us language to explain this obsession that we have with people. And also it really carries a denial to seeing who these people really are, because then that would break the fantasy. So this is what limerence is in a nutshell. You meet someone, or you see them once or twice, or you go on a date with them, or somebody introduces you to them, or they're somewhere in your workplace, and you know enough about them, such as, I don't know, their name or where they're from, you know some things, basic stuff. And then the relationship you have with them in real life does not reflect, first of all, the amount of hours you spend thinking about them and the relationship you have in your head with them, right? So whatever you are thinking about them is not something that happens in reality. So you have scenarios of all sorts of things that you cannot really pragmatize and make happen in reality because that's not where you're at. Like it's just a coworker, or is your boss, or is a friend, or is somebody else. And the important thing that we have to always remember here is that we can't really know these people because of this always some sort of scenarios. Oh, they're avoidant, they're married, they're my boss, they're this, they're that. It's almost like limerence really thrives on prohibited love type of thing, right? Or a love that can't really flourish or happen. And usually we attribute that to the other person that we're in limerence with somehow not being available to us, either because they're emotionally unavailable, they're married, they're of a different orientation or whatever. Yet we are still standing on this side, supposedly super available, entertaining fantasies and scenarios about a person that seems unavailable, because what sort of keeps our limerence going is the feeling that these people one day will turn around and realize that we are the love of their lives. And we have to just wait or manifest them or do something, or something magical is going to happen. And one day they're going to wake up to their love for us. So to an extent, we have this belief that these people deep down love us, deep down want us, and deep down we are perfect for them. That's what we decided. It's just a matter of time or effort or some sort of miracle that they will find out. And when they find out, then we have this incredible vision that this person will make our lives magical. Now, explained like that, I hope you can see how when we're thinking this way, we are in a really childlike mindset, right? Of thinking, this person actually really wants me, loves me. I'm sure they do. It's just a matter of time of me acting a certain way or doing a certain thing or looking a certain way, or whatever. There's something I can do that will finally change what's happening now. And this person is going to come to their senses and they are going to realize that they love me. And after that, we will be happy ever after. Children think that way. And the first think that way when their unloving parents don't show up as loving to them. But the child expects love and anticipates love and hopes for love. And to get that love, they're supposed to continue to hope and pray and do all sorts of things for that love to finally happen. And so, in a nutshell, when we're in limerence, we may be recreating the loss of love and the effort to achieve connection with a parent that never gave it to us. Because my argument is this: if we had had a childhood where we experienced safe, reciprocated connection to a parent, that means we already know that we cannot sustain fantasies. That we don't go by putting puzzles together and imagining things, that we don't have to do all these mental gymnastics to maintain a bond that isn't there. And so the modeling that we have through our relationships as children really sets the tone for what we are expecting and what we think is available to us as adults. And when we were raised in emotional neglect and in disconnect and in unsafe environments where being in closeness was not only not an option, but if it had ever happened, it was unsafe. Then we find a way to adapt and continue to experience relationships in a way where we're not really in relationships, we're in the hopes of it, and we're also safe from them. Because there's a lot of fear of intimacy, there's fear to be seen, there's a lot of processes that are happening for us to entertain someone so unavailable and for us to sit down and make all of these scenarios that are not happening in our reality. The fixation with this person is telling, and it's a gateway. It's a gateway to our own healing, which is why I always say to people who are in limerence, instead of focusing on how to get over that limerent object or how to find true love, what you need to be looking at is the why that is in you, that is pushing you towards the direction where time and time again, you sustain yourself and your emotional needs based on fantasies, which are even less than crumbs, right? There's nothing, it's just fantasies. And so unless you look at why that is, and unless we heal the parts of us that are craving for love to such an extent that we would settle for imaginary worlds in fear of actually pragmatizing and experiencing what we are supposedly wanting to experience, then we have to be looking at ourselves. The antidote to limerence is reality. Not only the reality of what's out there between you and this person, to be like, I'm seeing the reality, they don't want me. And then tomorrow you're going to be in limerence with a new person because you need to continue to stay attached to love so that you can feel like there's hope for you and you can continue to recreate that loop of trying to make someone unavailable available to you, secure them, and you want to be loved and worshipped the way that you were entitled to but never got it. So it's not just that reality that we have to deal with. The external, we have to deal with our inner reality of what happened to us and why we attach the way that we do. See, limerence is a pattern, and limerence is a coping mechanism to what I think is our inability to cope with life. And we don't cope with life well. We don't feel well. We're at this baseline of constant grief. And here comes Limerence that sort of has this hopeful sense that something great is going to happen one day. And that hope keeps us going in what otherwise would be a life, just a hopeless life. And what happens is that when we get in Limerence like that, and then it doesn't work out, we'll get very, depressed and miserable. And then we'll have to find a new limerent object so that we can keep going again. But every time we lose an opportunity, and every time love fails in some capacity, or it doesn't work out, or we are even with them and we realize that, wait a minute, that's not what I thought it was, we will fall back not only to the grief that we started with, but we will fall back to the grief that we've never dealt with. I believe those who fall in limerence are used to be children who were not loved in ways that felt coherent and enough. They were not fulfilled in terms of being loved and seen in a way where that state really stunted in us, right? As children, we didn't grow out of that phase of needing to be loved, affirmed, and adored in a way that is unconditional. And so the perfect partner that we seek is essentially a perfect parent in the eyes of a partner, which is why we project all of our needs to this person. And again, the answer isn't to actually find and be in a relationship with such perfect partner, but it is to address the wounds and address the inner reality that is holding so much of the past, and that you're stuck in that past and living like a child, thinking like a child, falling in love like a child, although you're a grown person who could be experiencing intimacy. But the intimacy that you crave for, even if you were to be given the opportunity to have it, is so different than the adult-like intimacy that we can have in a relationship that it doesn't work out. Right? We don't have a realistic idea of what it's like to be in a relationship, because if we did, we wouldn't continue to entertain obsessions. Now, as with most things, when we get obsessed and when we're trying to cope with what is life, an unfulfilled life, a life that we feel not welcome in, right, turns into a type of an addiction. And as it is with most of addictions, there is the element of, it happens because we're trying to cope, but there's a big part of personal responsibility that needs to be taken. And that is the difference between certain health issues or even mental health conditions versus addiction, which is nothing to blame whoever is going to be in that place. But it's to say that, for example, a health issue, you go to the doctor, you get the medication, it's over, right? You're either going to be healed or not, and it's not really up to you to change how things progress, although you can do a few things to kind of make it better, right? But when it comes to addictive tendencies and addictive behaviors, we have the element where we can seek for help, whatever that is, from external factors. But there's the element of personal responsibility to keep figuring out new ways to cope, because essentially that's what we're looking at, right? We need to be looking at why we're addicted and working through that, and also how else can we cope. Obviously, the more deep into addiction we are, and the more traumatized we are, the more difficult it is to take charge of our inner experience and make those decisions in a clear mind, right? It comes to a point where we struggle so much there's no way out, or it feels. But with things like limerence, that it's not an addiction to a substance, we have to take charge of our mind. But a mind that isn't healed, a mind that is just tortured and is running away from everything, a mind that is used to being disconnected, will not conform with any of the tips and tricks of the sort of, don't think about them, don't call them, don't text them, don't view the stories. You know all these things, much like you know that if you wanted to lose weight, there's things that you should stop eating, or you should stop eating, or eating less, or whatever, right? And so what I noticed in my time of teaching about this, and I used to teach a lot about it on YouTube, I had a lot of videos, but what I noticed, and the reason I withdrew all these videos and I wanted to kind of restart on how I'm teaching about limerence, is that people were getting almost addicted to listening about limerence and talking about it, but instead of taking it in and realizing their reason for limerence, I would look at the comments and there would be questions, but what if my limerent object is this? But what if, right? So they were trying to, I was giving the picture as I am now, which I admittedly, my delivery may not be what you're used to, but I'm not here to make you feel better about yourself in terms of the ways that you struggle. I'm here to help you get out of this. Basically, generally, I want people to be awakened, and I want us to be awakened to the things that we're sort of doing and are wasting our life, right? So if this is in a style that resonates, that's totally fine by me. But I felt like I'm not going to continue to enable the addiction or the fantasy, because if we're looking at these things and all we're seeing is whether we make sort of like we are the exception, right? It's almost like somebody alcoholic saying, yeah, but I don't drink like that person, so I'm not really addicted. No, my drink doesn't bother. Like this type of alcohol is good for me. Like all these things. Fine, right? We have to be addressing things for what they are, not because I say so, right? But when you listen to things and you say, oh, it's because of the mother wound. Oh, it's because of my father did that. It's because of, that's my history. Yeah. And when we think that, instead of going back to the limerent object, yeah, but what about what they're doing? But what they're doing is confusing to like, what? We keep trying to find a way around it because we don't want to sit with the reality of our past. And that's the trick here. Limerence is a way to cope with what is an unfulfilled, uncomfortable life in which we don't feel loved or even welcome or connected to this world. And the reason we cope with limerence is because it's easier to live in our imagination. This is something beautiful that our mind does for us to kind of help us build worlds where it feels like we're somehow met rather than leave us here stranded and unmet. Although in how the time goes, that makes everything worse. As with everything that we do to cope, we address, we're missing out on something else by trying to cope with whatever else we're trying to cope with. So, but if we take it a step back and think, all right, I'm coping with limerence, and we say, what am I coping? What is the thing I'm trying to cope from, and what is it that I'm struggling with? And then we sit with ourselves long enough to do inner work about all the things that we're struggling and we can't cope with, and we've been avoiding and using limerence to avoid, and the fact that our life is unfulfilled, and the fact that everything is unfulfilling. And eventually we will sit with all of that discomfort, which will increase our capacity to cope, by the way. And we sit enough with that discomfort, and then we finally realize that we have to do something about it. I would make videos on TikTok especially, that they're quicker and stuff, and people will say, I would say limerence is a way where we're trying to kind of bring some type of joy in a life that is has no joy and no fulfillment. I know, but nothing else brings me joy. All right. If what brings you joy is imagining someone loving you, but really they don't, and they're not really here with you, then we have to continue to push the bar as to what is it that is enough for us to be joyful. And maybe there's things in real life that can give us joy that are more reliable and are bringing in more presence, right? So to conclude this video, I'm going to start posting more about limerence, but I just wanted to preface and say that if we want to heal from limerence, we have to take personal responsibility in how and what we're willing to do in order to actually heal from it. One is address the childhood wounds and whatever is the attachment injuries and our experiences that may be behind our limerence. The other is also teaching ourselves to cope with things. And that means that we have to start participating in the lives that we're in, right? We have to start being active in our lives and start finding fulfillment and joy in things that we actually are able to achieve, which is why I think it's a great thing to start setting goals when we are, when we're trying to get our limerence. We have to set some goals for our lives so that we can find the connection between I'm striving for something, I'm actually getting it, instead of being stuck and longing eternally. And then life goes by, and not only we haven't managed to get the person that we want, we would be missing out on our entire lives of getting anything that we want, right? It's not just the person, it's the job that we wanted, the house that we wanted, the body that we wanted, the friends that we wanted, the experiences. We get none of it because we don't train ourselves to move towards the things that we want, right? This may not apply to all of you. You may have achieved things or not. Obviously, I'm speaking to all of you here. Whoever resonates, that's good. But we have to start thinking in terms of our personal experience, but understand that we have to address what happened to us, find better ways to cope, and keep trying to work through this. And also, on the side, especially as women, we have to dismantle and break and shatter all these fantasies about love, happy forever afters, all these myths that we heard about a magical other coming to complete us. These myths are a collective representation of our need to be unconditionally loved by parents who have been very unloving. Imagine your parents have been unloving if you're young. The older generations, parents loving their children may not have even been a thing. It's like, you know what I'm talking about, like the emotional needs of children. We are barely becoming aware of the fact that that they were entitled to be emotionally cared for. We just thought, older times, they just thought, I'm just going to have to dress this kid and give it food and a place to sleep. That's more than enough. Like a dog, like you just put them in a doghouse and just whatever, which we don't even do to our dogs now, right? And a lot of us who have dogs treat them as if they are kids, which is a good thing to say. But technically, being a child did not mean what it means today. Did not mean comforts, did not mean unconditional love, did not mean guidance. Just meant I own this thing that I birthed. I'm supposed to train it. It's going to help me around with the house, and it's going to be forever devoted to me. And then when I grow old, it's going to take care of me. That's what it was. And then we have all these influences, what we hear about love, what we see, people telling us all sorts of stuff about their relationships, which end a year after they told us or a month. And we believe in the magical other with so much passion and immaturity that we do not see meaning in our lives outside of being chosen and living like a happy little princess, a happy forever after. And we have to become a little bit more critical about all of the things that we consumed as kids, because the magical love that most of us have dreamt about is nowhere to be seen in our environment, but we still think we will be the exception. Now, I'm not saying we can't be the exception to things, but I would recommend that if we want to be the exception to something, we can try to be exceptionally devoted to ourselves to an extent where we take care of our unmet needs in a way that only we can. We take care of our inner child. We begin to learn what it's like to be an adult. We begin to learn how to deal with disappointment. We begin to learn how to be present rather than avoid and dream. And we begin to really ground ourselves in a reality which at first is going to be horrible to live with because there's nothing in it. But if we work towards the life that we want, that reality can become a reality that, it has its ups and downs, but we don't feel like escaping it anymore. And we don't feel like clinging on fake illusions and hopes in order to push through. And maybe when we struggle, we start reaching out to people who are there. We start building connections that are real. We start looking at life for what it can give us and what it can provide for us, rather than continue to stay attached to a life that's going to come afterwards by missing out on what life has to give us today. I'll see you soon.